The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. This is Ben Tuine. We'll just give it a couple minutes here for others to log in. I see that there's about 10 of you that are trying to log in to set up your audio. So we're just going to give it a minute. While we allow those others to log on, I'm just going to go through what we're going to cover today. Last week we covered material fees, non-covered services using the HITECH Act, the federal law, as well as our now local Utah state law regarding non-covered services. Many of you sent emails to request those consent forms, but for those of you that still need consent forms for material fees, just let me know. I sent the recording out to Stacy, and I believe she has that available if anybody wants to follow up on last week's webinar, to go ahead and have reach out to Stacy or myself, and I can email you a YouTube link where you can access last week's webinar as well. So today is going to be recorded, and if anybody wants a copy of today's presentation, just send Teresa or myself an email. This presentation will be available on YouTube by tomorrow. Now, when I say on YouTube, that's just for the convenience of you being able to easily view it if you're connected to an internet server. But these webinars are not intended for anybody outside of the Intermountain Dental Associates group. So please do not forward this content and information to those that have not joined the group, as this is customized just for Intermountain. Okay, so let's get started here. Today I want to talk about the appeal process. Whenever you get a denied claim, what process should you follow? And I know many of you are familiar with the appeal process, and many of you may already be very, very good at it. But I want to take it a step further. And when I say take it a step further, I just want to make sure that everybody is familiar with how to appeal properly, and not, even after the fourth appeal, if it does not get covered, I want to make sure everybody knows if it's legitimate services, how you can get the insurance carrier to pay. So before we move on, I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. So go ahead and click on that poll there just to make sure that the audio works. So we'll give that a minute here. So if I speak gibberish, that's just to make sure people can hear me. So go ahead and fill that out. Looks like most of you can hear me. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, what I want to cover next is the part about policing illegal and unethical insurance practices. And I know many of you experience this on a day-to-day basis, where an insurance carrier would deny a legitimate claim. For instance, how many buildups are denied? How many buildups are come into question? How many of your scaling and root planing or perio maintenance or anything else gets denied? And how many times do you have to appeal to get those things covered by insurance carriers? I want to tell you a quick story about bullies. Insurance carriers, my thought is that there's no better way to describe them than them being bullies. The insurance companies, that's a business model. It's a 100% for profit, and in fact, an extreme profit organization where their main goal is to make money. Their main goal is not patient care. Their main goal is not to protect their patients. That is not what they're in the business for. Their main goal is to collect a premium from a patient or an employer group and not pay claims. You'll notice this pattern regularly, that insurance carriers just don't have an interest in paying claims. So there's no other way to explain them other than them being the ultimate bully when it comes to claim services. I want to tell you this story to kind of prep us for the presentation today. So many of you may recall the stories of David and Goliath, the Spartan army led by King Leonidas at the Battle of Thermopylae, or a personal favorite, the Battle of Baltimore at Fort McHenry. So on September 13, 1814, British warships delivered a downpour of rockets and mortar shells onto Fort McHenry in Baltimore Harbor. This relentless pounding of the American fort lasted for 25 hours. I mean, imagine that. That's a long time. Weeks prior to this attack, the British burned the Capitol, the Treasury, and the President's house. Needless to say, America's defenses were crushed, and any hope of victory was shattered. Francis Scott Key, a 35-year-old American lawyer, witnessed the barrage of Fort McHenry from just 8 miles away. It seemed as though Mother Earth had opened and was vomiting shot and shell in a sheet of fire and brimstone, he wrote. Given the magnitude of the attack, he was certain of a landslide British victory. But in the dawn's early light, he saw the American flag, not the Union Jack, waving bravely over the fort. The Americans had won. During the attack of Fort McHenry, Key penned a poem we now call the Star-Spangled Banner. Many historians believe that Key's poem restored the confidence of those who were defending the land of the free and the home of the brave, despite the scale of attack by British forces. Now, I love that story simply because it illustrates how anybody can overcome a bully that seems sometimes undefeatable. I mean, you and I deal with this on a day-to-day basis, especially for those of you that have children, that go to school, and hopefully they're not bullying other kids, but it's an unavoidable thing as a child. At some point, unfortunately, you're going to get bullied by somebody else in the school. It gets better. It doesn't always have to be that way, but it does get better. In business, you get bullied. In dentistry, you get bullied. And, this is a problem that we have to fix. Most insurance carriers, what you often see is that they'll come to you and they'll say, oh, we have a dental consultant or a dentist on our end that review the claim and thinks you're a bunch of idiots. Whatever they say on the claim, they go even as far as telling the patient that the doctor that they're seeing is overdiagnosing them. And all of this is completely appropriate. An insurance carrier is not allowed to diagnose dentistry from afar. Without physically examining the patient, you cannot perform any sort of diagnostics. The only thing that the insurance carrier is supposed to do is they're supposed to review the claim and check a box saying, okay, a narrative was submitted, x-rays were submitted, or if it's a bridge, a panel was submitted. That's all they do. That's all they're supposed to do, is just make sure that the narrative says this. Like for a buildup, do they mention retention in there? Check, and they go down that list. What you often see is the dental consultants, they have this sort of superior attitude that, oh, I am hired to be a police for the insurance carrier, so now I'm just going to start bullying everybody out there because everybody sucks. Everybody's dentistry is not as good as mine. Unfortunately, you have some dental consultants that are in that mindset. More of what you see on the claim denial side is just an insurance carrier flat out denying a claim without any review. Back in February, I don't know if any of you have heard this, but this was national news. The former Aetna medical director, who was in charge of reviewing claims, the entire department that reviews medical claims, he reported and testified in a public hearing that in his 25 years as a medical director for Aetna, now this is a medical doctor, medical director for Aetna, he testified that he reviewed 0 claims in his time frame, 25 years as an Aetna medical director. Now, that's no surprise to me. It may be a surprise to you, but we get calls on cell phones from friends of ours that work for dental insurance companies like Dental Select. We had a friend that used to work there. Delta Dental, we have friends that work there. United Concordia, I know actual dentists that work there that live in Harrisburg and other parts of Pennsylvania. And many of them call my cell phone from their cell phone, so it's not recorded, not on the record. And they say, at United Concordia just changed our policy that we're going to deny perio 80% of the time. And we're going to deny buildups 60% of the time. So without a review, 60% of those buildups and 80% of those perio claims are going to slip into that denial category. And I asked, why are they doing that? Well, it's obvious. If we have $150 million in interest-bearing account and we don't have to pay that out to the dentist, the insurance carrier would make a fortune overnight in that high interest-bearing account, So not paying claims or delaying claims is a great reason for the insurance company to make money off of the stock exchange or off of any other type of investment. The other reason is out of 80% of those that receive a denial for perio, 60% for the buildups, a large portion of those don't appeal successfully. So therefore, we just, we don't pay it. They're legitimate claims, most of them, but Majority don't appeal successfully, so therefore the insurance carrier saves money. Now this, by the way, folks, is 100% illegal. If an insurance carrier denies a claim without any backup, if they're engaging in a delay tactic, if there's no actual clinical review, no physical person, a licensed dentist or consultant that reviews a claim to back up why they denied the claim, that is illegal. An insurance carrier cannot delay a payment of a claim unless there are obvious improprieties and defects to the claim. And now this is the actual law. When I say impropriety or defect, the claim has to, I mean, it may not, a series of codes may not be appropriate. For instance, you might be submitting a 4341, and then on the narrative it says 1 to 3 teeth, which I believe the appropriate code is 4342. That's an impropriety where the codes don't match. You're submitting for a full mouth debridement, and there's no narrative. Things like that where there's not enough to complete the checklist to pay the claim. Now, the impropriety, the defect part of it is, the impropriety or defect is overbilling, overcoding. For instance, if there's a pattern of submitting higher than the usual, this is something that's hard to detect with an insurance carrier, but they have patterns on their end, percentages of how many times doctors submit certain procedure codes. And sometimes when you're out of the norm, they'll investigate that, meaning some offices will go from billing 20% of their adult patients in the perio category. Next month and each month thereafter, they'll be at 40%. So that is unusual. They'll have to investigate that in an effort to make sure that the doctor or the team members aren't making mistakes in how they're submitting claims, or the doctors are not engaging in over-diagnosing dentistry. Now, those are legitimate. They will come in, they'll ask, or they'll call you, they'll ask questions, and in the end, they have an obligation just to make sure that the benefits are being paid for appropriately. But they cannot deny a claim without review. Okay, so our process in terms of appeal is this. Number one, you have to do your best dentistry. And this is a no-brainer. And some of you are like, duh, we get it. I mean, we're already doing our best dentistry, man. Teach us something new. Okay, we'll get to that. But doing your best dentistry also means doing your best coding. So number one and number two on the screen, they go hand in hand. Meaning, number one, do you really know the definition of a buildup? And are all of your buildups qualified? Are they supported by the CDT definition on what a buildup is? So if you have any questions about that, read up on the buildup. If you want a copy of the buildup definition, let me know. But that's the most common one. Many doctors I've come across, they say, well, every crown requires a buildup. Well, yeah, that's true. Every crown may require some form of buildup. However, the ADA and the CDT have a specific guideline on when you can use the buildup code. So although some of you might believe every crown requires a buildup, well, not every crown qualifies for a CDT buildup. So that's the key there, is making sure that your dentistry matches CDT. And you'd be surprised. There are a lot of things that are misunderstood with CDT. So I recommend purchasing the Charles Blair Coding with Confidence book or the ADA CDT book, and just get to know your top codes, top 30 or 40 codes. Many offices are surprised. And a good example is many general dentistry offices don't know that they can use D0180 for a new patient perio exam, or if you're an existing patient and you're doing a full perio examination, you can use D0180 and not D0150. That's not just exclusive to the periodontal office. So know the CDT codes and understand as well the guidelines of coverage for the specific insurance carrier. We won't go in it today, but if any of you are interested, we also recommend taking it a step further and building an employer-specific profile. Every time you verify benefits, you don't necessarily need to verify benefits on smaller things for every single patient under every single employer type. You can have a sort of a cheat sheet of an employer coverage section, and within the employer profile, you have different tiers. You have lower level, you have those that work as entry level, you have those that are management, and then you have those that are executive. So the Disney organization, for instance, might have 3 or 4 different types of dental plans under the one Delta dental program that they've purchased, One might have a $1,000 annual max, another one will have a $1,500 annual max, and the other might have a $2,000 annual max. You can save a whole lot of time in building understanding what is covered for most of your patients if you build employer profiles rather than looking at it on an individual patient basis. Again, you have to pre-authorize or get a benefit coverage for something that's larger, but for the most part, you can be a little bit more efficient there. And what you'll find is that as you understand the coverage for each of the insurance plans, it does greatly help you to understand also the qualifications to get certain procedures covered. Okay, so knowing your best, doing your best dentistry, knowing the CDT codes, and then finding a pattern of abuse. If your buildups are getting denied consistently for one insurance carrier, I would red flag it. I would definitely look at it and find out the pattern. The pattern that we found out with Tessina, who works part-time for our office, she started to notice that United Healthcare, Delta Dental, EMI, Dental Select, were starting to deny perio like crazy. Almost every other claim, they were denying perio. And it took 4 appeals to get those claims covered. So what we did is we went back, and Tessina and I sat down, and the first thing we asked are we coding correctly? Is the dentistry appropriate? Does the dentistry and CDT match? So we checked number 1 and number 2, and then we started to realize a pattern that for United Healthcare, it was like 3 out of 4 claims were being denied on the perio side. And it took us 4 appeals to get those claims covered. So we hired an attorney, and we quickly found out that in Utah, you cannot sue the insurance carrier for things like this. The attorney, the legal system, there are laws in Utah that say that Utah's not a right to action state, meaning you cannot sue an insurance carrier for claims issues. Your only course of action is to report these things to the insurance commissioner, and that's exactly what we did next. So we reported these issues to the insurance commissioner, and we received the common response: no, there's nothing we can do about it, simply because we're not hearing enough complaints about this very issue. So when we heard that from the insurance commissioner, and that's the standard response that we've heard over the years, is that the insurance commissioner is useless and they won't do anything. So we became creative, and Tessina, she is one of the leaders of the ADOM group here in Utah, the group for office managers, a study club for office managers. And we got 200 offices to say, yeah, well, we're seeing exactly the same thing, so we'll also participate in this complaint process with the insurance commissioner. Tessina called the insurance commissioner and said, well, we have 200 offices that are ready to complain. How should we get these complaints over to you? The commissioner quickly came back and said, well, no, we don't want to work that hard. Government pay, so you get government work. So in essence, what they did is they took Tessina's case only. They said, yeah, we'll take yours, but we won't take all 200. So they took the claims from Tessina. Tessina submitted a bunch of them for most of the insurance carriers that were engaging in these unnecessary denials. 2 months later, the insurance commissioner came back and said, hey, look, we hired an independent consultant to review your claims, and there's nothing wrong with your claims. There are no improprieties or defects, and we've learned that each of these insurance carriers are engaging in a delay tactic, which is 100% inappropriate and illegal in our state. So what we did as an insurance commissioner is we sent a warning out to each insurance carrier and put them on notice, saying that if we hear any more complaints about this, then we're going to put your license at risk in the state of Utah, meaning they could be at jeopardy of being able to sell dental plans in the state because they're not following state laws as it pertains to claims payment. In addition to that, there was sufficient grounds to fine each of these insurance carriers per incident. I believe the fine was in the range of $2,500 per violation. So that was a huge victory. And Tessina went back 2 years, found out what the statute of limitation was, and she said, I'm going to teach these insurance carriers a lesson, and they cannot mess with me. So she did that. She went back a couple of years, and the insurance commissioner processed those claims for several months. In essence, found that there were additional violations. So So this was a few years ago, 2.5 years ago, I believe. Year to date, Tessina has received zero denials on perio from all these insurance carriers. In fact, the denials on the buildups and all the other unrelated things that we didn't have the insurance commissioner look at, it started to become better and better and better, even for other insurance carriers. The one thing that we learned through this process is that the insurance carriers have a database that they share. They have a database that shows which offices appeal, how many times they appeal, what success rate they have, how strong their language is, do they use the insurance commissioner? Basically, is this an office that we want to mess with? And they share that information in an effort to find out whose buttons we can push. How many times they can be successful denying a claim, knowing that they're not going to pay it because the offices don't push hard enough. So we learned that there is a system, a shared system among insurance carriers to share data in an effort to basically collude against you. That's not illegal because you have this antitrust law that exempts insurance carriers from doing that. So that's why they do it. But this was a huge victory, and this is exactly how we got Tessina's office to successfully appeal. So I'm going to show you a couple of other things here. We have a friend up in the state of Washington who was gracious enough to share this letter, and I don't know how to zoom this in. Oh, here we go. So this letter here was, okay, Delta Dental on the top there. This was, Delta Dental is the largest payer in the state of Washington. So this is a letter, basically this letter, says, well, let's read it. So this letter is in regards to an appeal filed with Washington Dental Services by so-and-so regarding services under his secondary provider by you on such and such date. Essentially, the underlying section here says Washington Dental Services, which is basically Delta Dental of the state of Washington, it determined that the services provided did not meet the clinical criteria guidelines established by Washington Dental Services to benefit the services under the patient's dental plan. So this line here, Washington Dental Services recommends that you review these guidelines periodically to understand the requirements for benefit determination. Washington Dental Services understands that patients rely on their dentist to know the requirements for their dental plan. The Washington Education Association also wants its members to be informed consumers of their healthcare benefits. So basically what they're saying is that you're responsible for educating the patients about their dental plan. That is complete BS. Forgive my French if that offends you, but it's not your responsibility. Unfortunately, the responsibility on educating the patients is put on you. So therefore, when a patient has an issue with regards to how, a claim being denied, they come after you and not their insurance carrier. That's not appropriate, in my opinion. So furthermore, they say Delta Dental is encouraging patients to ask their dentist to explain the reasons for the services being recommended. I mean, that is just 100% hogwash. And then down on the bottom here, it says future appeals of this nature for services that do not meet the clinical criteria guidelines to benefit the services will result in Delta's placing you on a focus review for services by the authority included in your provider, just basically blah, blah, blah. They're threatening this doctor to say that, look, if you continue to submit good claims to us that we don't want to pay, we're going to put you on a focus review. So here's the doctor's appeal. I love this appeal. In fact, this will serve as a really good template for your own appeals. I have several of these from this particular doctor who was gracious enough to share this with you. So I want to read the middle section here. And of course, if you want copies of this to use in an effort to help with your own appeals, send an email to me. I'll send this over to Stacy and Teresa today. So she said, you will clearly see in the enclosed colored digital images an DL decay found under the amalgam was as well as the crack in the pulpal floor that completely undermines the DL cusp of this tooth. You will still believe upon, if you still believe upon review of my intraoral images that a buildup is not necessary, I request that you draw me a diagram to explain exactly how I might finalize the prep of this tooth without a buildup. I will forward you drawings. I will forward your drawings onto my dental laboratory for a review of how a crown could be possibly made without a buildup, given the deep undercuts that you may know are placed as the only means of retention for amalgam restorations. I will also forward your drawing to the Restorative Dentistry Department at the University of Washington School of Dentistry for further education. Your proposal would be a new and fascinating method of appropriate restorations that would contradict decades of principles taught by the American dental schools, So a little bit of sarcasm there, but when you read this further, you'll find that her appeal is very strong. The one thing that she missed here, I spoke with her and I said, look, the one thing that I would add to this is that their denial of the buildup is going to force the patient to pay for that service out of pocket. It doesn't matter if they say the patient can't pay for it out of pocket. If the buildup was required, no insurance commissioner would let an insurance carrier get away with saying, you can't force the doctor to do a legitimate service and not pay for it and then expect that the patient wouldn't be paying for it out of pocket. And this is the key that you want to mention, not that you would collect from the patient. The objective here is that if a legitimate service is performed and it's denied by the insurance carrier, you have a right to pursue the patient for that treatment. And the key with mentioning that is that an insurance commissioner will look at this and say, well, we don't want the patients to incur a cost for services or treatment that is covered by the dental plan. So the insurance commissioner would then cite in your favor saying, look, this is legitimate. The claim, the buildup is necessary for crown retention, and shame on the insurance carrier for not covering it and forcing the patient to pay out of pocket. The insurance plan is designed to alleviate financial means for the patient by providing coverage. So when an insurance carrier blocks that coverage, they're in essence in violation of state ethics and as well as legal issues as it pertains to covering legitimate claims. So these appeals, the only thing I asked Dr. Cook to enter into these appeals is mentioning to them that if they choose to not pay for this buildup or whatever service that was denied, that you will report this action to the insurance commissioner for further review, just like what we did with Tessina. Now, her appeals alone, without that, were very successful. But when she added the insurance commissioner, she started to notice that a lot of these appeals just stopped because the insurance carrier was afraid that now you're going to take this to the regulatory agency that governs their license to sell dental plans, and if they're in violation of any laws, the insurance carrier can get into some big trouble with the insurance commissioner. Now, if it's a state plan, your state insurance commissioner is the one that you want to focus on. If it's a federal plan, there's a specific department in the Department of Labor that covers federal ERISA plans like GEHA or Humana's FEP or Blue Cross's FEP, anything tied to federal. The insurance commissioner would not be able to touch simply because it's governed by the Department of Labor. Now that information I can share with Teresa and Stacy as well. So if any of you have any issues or any questions about appeals, I recommend stepping up your game, using the thread or the insurance commissioner. Ask me for these appeal letters so that you can see how others are doing it in terms of getting insurance carriers to stop these unnecessary denials, and give it a try. And I promise you, as you implement that, it definitely does make a big difference. So I'm going to close on this. What we talked about, this is not a discussion. This kind of seems like more of a dictatorship, just me talking, which I don't necessarily feel 100% comfortable about, because I understand that a lot of you have some feedback, some concerns, maybe some questions. So just with me talking, it's just you're just getting 2% of the education as a whole. And oftentimes, you have to research things more because 2% sometimes may not be significant. At 1 foot, you're looking at a half an inch. At 1 mile, you're looking at 60 yards. 1,300 miles, you're looking at 28 miles. When you look at a grander scheme of things, two degrees actually means a lot more significance. So 2 degrees, of failure or success could mean a great deal over a long period of time. 1979, Flight 901, Air New Zealand, set off to fly to Antarctica to take a look at the penguins. They didn't have anywhere to land. It was just a sightseeing destination. They'd fly down, they circle Mount Erebus, they take a look at the penguins and the landscape, and then they go back home. So back then, these aircrafts, they much like the ones today, but a lot less technology. They dialed in everything manually. So when they took off from New Zealand, they set course, but the pilot made an error. Air traffic control actually made an error and gave them coordinates that was 2 degrees off of where they actually needed to go. So they set course. Because they were 2 degrees off, they traveled for 1,300 miles. By the time they reached their destination on a cloudy day, they did not know that they were 28 miles off course. They were supposed to be here along the shoreline, but because they were 2 degrees off here, the 2-degree path that they actually took on a very cloudy day put them in the path of Mount Erebus. Now, the pilots didn't make this error. It was the air traffic control that gave them the 2-degree mistake here. That 2-degree mistake unfortunately cost everybody's life. All the lives on this flight, everybody perished because as they were descending into the clouds, as their indicators were telling them to, thinking that they were here along the shoreline, they ended up descending right into Mount Erebus, and the entire airplane crashed and exploded. Nobody survived. The point of this, folks, is that what we talked about over the last 3 weeks are just 2 degrees of information, and oftentimes, without knowing the full scope, without having the consent forms, without asking questions and clarifying things and studying some more on these issues, there's a lot more that needs to be done in an effort for you to be successful. So I recommend What Next. I share this video, just this here, to the doctors that, your colleagues are not the enemy, but, don't go burning down somebody's practice. Instead, ask questions and check out additional resources. Check out our podcast, sayno2ppos.com. You'll find resources on everything that we've discussed and a lot more on Say No to PPOs. Say No to PPOs is not necessarily, I'm not saying go and cancel all your PPO contracts. Essentially, don't take the PPO's word, as face value. You want to challenge them. You want to appeal. You want to be successful in those appeals. And then, of course, you can send me an email, ben@veritasdentalresources.com. So, folks, that's it. I'm going to close the webinar. Thank you so much. If you want a recording of today's episode, just reach out to Stacy tomorrow. We'll have that available. Otherwise, send me an email. And then, of course, the last thing here is sayno2ppos.com for more information on all things insurance. It was great having you all over the last 3 weeks. I look forward to your questions. In the meantime, have a great day and have a great Memorial Day celebration this weekend. Hope you all have a wonderful summer and a wonderful rest of the year. Thank you all.